Welcome to another episode of HERcast with Dr. Chito. Today, our title is Beyond the Scars, Embracing Hope and Healing After Trauma. Join us as we dive deep into the journey of trauma healing with the inspiring Dr. Chika Nya-Erik. In this episode, we explore the path beyond the scars, where hope and healing intertwine, guiding us towards a brighter tomorrow. Tune in for insightful conversations on embracing resilience, finding hope, and navigating the road to healing after trauma. Welcome, Dr. Chika Nya-Erik. Now I want to introduce you properly to this amazing woman. Chika Nya-Erik is a lover of beauty and words with a background in pastoral counseling, certified in crisis counseling by the Institute of Counseling, Glasgow, UK. She combines scientifically proven mental health principles with spiritual wisdom to bring healing to the church community. Chika is the driving force behind EPL, Eat, Play, Laugh events, providing moments of joy amidst daily chaos. An accomplished author, her work includes The Colors I See Through the Lattice and contributions to the health literacy concepts in textbooks. She is recognized as a fellow of the Health Leadership Institute of Tufts University School of Medicine and the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Consulators of Nigeria. Now, with over 35 years of experience as a public health physician, Chika's impact extends beyond counseling and writing. She cherishes her role as a devoted wife, mother, grandmother, and godmother. So you know that today we were going to have a really great and deep and insightful, I should say, episode. Welcome again I'm so excited. I just feel this is an important topic.
Thank you for your kind introduction.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. We're talking about trauma. And like we said, which you said before, trauma seems to be the new buzzword. It's such in a very stressful climate, and we have a lot of people struggling to survive, I would say, or through it, not even thrive, just survive.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about, trauma. Trauma. What exactly is trauma?
So there are so many definitions of trauma, but I'm going to approach it from everyday language, that everyday person. Trauma is a deep wound of the heart that takes a long time to heal. A deep wound of the heart that takes a long time to heal. And I say that with the understanding that we're in an environment where there's a lot of stigma about heart wounds.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stigma about emotional wounds, emotional illness, psychological illness. So we want to deny it. We want to pretend it doesn't exist. We want to make jokes out of it so that we don't have to accept that this is really happening. But a human being is spirit, soul, and body. So if you have an injury on your arm or on your leg, you're in a hurry to rush and do something about it. You don't want it to get worse. You don't want it to get infected. You want it to heal. So you quickly take action. So the question we should ask is, why is it that when someone has a wound in the heart, we want to pretend it's not there?
That's true.
We want to bury it.
Yeah.
So what happens if you have a physical wound and you bury it and you cover it?
It gets infected and gets worse.
And you know that can go to sepsis. As doctors, we know that.
Yes.
And then the sepsis, when it comes to you in the hospital, is an emergency.
Yes.
You have to do so much, and you may lose the person. So I think it doesn't occur to us that when you have a heart wound and you don't take good care of it, the consequences are waiting for you somewhere down the line.
Yes.
In proportions you can never imagine. And a lot of times things happen to people and you wonder, oh, oh, she was such a calm, easygoing person. In fact, she was friendly. We don't know. How could she have killed herself?
Yes.
So it doesn't have to get there.
And that's...
We have to begin as a society and as a people to embrace the fact that a heart wound is real.
True.
And a heart wound should be attended to as seriously, as quickly, and as completely as you would take care of a physical wound.
Right, it's important. And that, I know you've talked about what trauma is, but in our environment, in our climate, where we're still kind of ignoring it or in denial, I must say, how common is trauma?
It's very common. But the thing is, we don't identify it as trauma. Even in our individual lives as individuals, there are ways we behave, there are ways we think, there are ways we relate to ourselves and other people that everybody knows is a bit off. But we kind of accept it and say, oh, that's the way she is. Or that's the way I am.
Yes.
Or sometimes we even say, that's the way we are in our family.
Irritable, maybe sometimes.
Yes. So we accept the trauma and we say it's our personality. But it is not.
It's not our personality.
And if we bother to explore deeply and find the roots of it, you may find that that personality trait that you all share in your family was caused by a very devastating experience you shared.
Oh, true.
And the trauma has not been resolved, has not even been accepted for what it is. So it is widespread. And how you would know it's widespread is, what are the things that cause trauma, for instance? Let's say growing up in a home with alcoholic parent. Isn't that common?
Yes, it's common.
Growing up in a home where one of the parents is being abused by the other.
Yes.
Growing up in a home
That's common.
where there is some degree of neglect. It may not be financial. Even in homes that you take care of the children financially, you can have emotional neglect.
Yes.
And some attachment surveys have shown, from some Harvard professors, have shown that emotional withdrawal of a mother is as devastating as sexual abuse of a child.
Wow.
That's how bad it is.
Wow.
So it is widespread, but a lot of times we ignore it. We pretend it's not there. Or like I said, we accept it as personality traits. But we can be healed. That's the news, the good news.
That we can be healed. That's really the good news, honestly. So another thing I want to, so now you said that, because I want to make sure that if I have anybody around me, also I would like to identify if they have, or they're dealing with trauma, no matter how they try to suppress it. What are some of the, I would say, signs of unresolved trauma?
Okay, so
what are, apart from the irritability, what other things should we look out for?
There are three main groups of signs, I would say, that you would find that could indicate that someone has unresolved trauma. One of them is reliving the experience. There's a tendency, if you've had a very traumatic experience or series of experiences, that you find that you just keep thinking about it. You can't forget it. When you meet people, you don't even know when you begin to talk about it. You repeat the story over and over and over again. You can't help yourself. People even begin to avoid you because they are like,
draining.
You know, that's always telling that story, oh, we're tired of it. But they don't realize it's a pain. You know, it's like when you have a pin that is lodged somewhere and you're trying to get the wound to heal. If you don't get that pin out, that wound will never heal. So reliving the experience, and when people relive the experience, in the daytime when they're awake, it can come as flashbacks. You feel as if you're back in that place, as if you're repeating that experience, as if, you know, all the emotions, everything that go with it, you sort of experience them all over again. You can almost smell what it smelled like. You can almost, you know, identify maybe the dress the person was wearing, if it had something to do with someone, you know. And then if you're sleeping, it can come in the form of nightmares. Repeated nightmares, repeated scary nightmares over and over again. So you find reliving the experience is a very serious indicator that someone may be suffering from an unresolved trauma. The other thing is avoiding reminders of the experience. So sometimes you're reliving the experience, you're talking about it all the time, you know, you're dreaming about it. But then there is that other end where you don't want to remember it. You don't want to talk about it. In fact, if someone asks you about your childhood, you say, I don't remember. Because you don't want to. It's too painful to go there.
Painful, yes.
You know, you want to avoid anything that reminds you of it. Maybe it's something that happened in a particular town. You will never go to that town. Nothing will take you there. Or if it's a certain part of town, you can go around, take the longest route just to avoid passing there. Maybe it's a certain person or persons. The point is you avoid everything that reminds you. And sometimes that avoidance can lead to even memory loss. It can get to a point where
I think my mother did that to me.
Yes. You genuinely don't even remember. It's not that you're pretending. Or
you just have gaps in memory.
Exactly. So you can have gaps in your memory, or you can completely even forget that any question around there, you just draw a blank. You genuinely don't remember.
Yes.
And then part of avoiding reminders of experience is also, because it's such a painful experience, people go into all kinds of addictions. So you find that most addictions are rooted in unresolved trauma.
Wow.
So you want something to numb the pain.
The pain, yes.
So it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be work, it could be food, it could be sex.
People don't know it can be work.
Yeah.
Throw yourself into work to numb the pain.
Exactly. It could be food. So there are a lot of surveys that have shown that a lot of people that have eating disorders is rooted in unresolved trauma. So because it's not resolved, they just keep eating and they don't know why they keep eating. You know, obesity, bulimia, anorexia, all the various eating disorders, many of them are associated with unresolved trauma.
Because you know when you're eating, they always say when they're eating, they feel better.
Yes, there's something you're trying to satisfy. There is a need you're trying to, but you think it's hunger.
Yes.
But it's a hunger for something, which you're not able to identify. So I was talking about the indicators, the things that could let you know that someone is suffering from trauma. So there's the reliving the experience, you know, there's avoiding reminders of the experience. And then the third part, which we were talking about, which is hypervigilance. So you find that you're always edgy, you're always anxious, you're always worried, you're agitated, you just can't calm down. And you might have problems falling asleep, or if you do fall asleep, you wake up in the middle, you're not able to continue, or you wake up too early, you know, different sleep disorders. And you could have palpitations, your heart is beating, you have panic attacks, you have this feeling of impending doom. Even when everything is happening for you, when people are looking at you and they're envious of your life and they're like, oh, Dr. Chito, you have it all going, you know, you just feel like, you have no idea. And who knows what else will go wrong soon. You know, so you're not able to embrace joy. You're not able to embrace, live in the moment and celebrate the moment. There's always that anticipation that something else is going to go wrong.
True.
So when you see all these indicators, whether it is by way of, you know, reliving the experience, or it is avoiding reminders of the experience, or being hypervigilant, you know, you have to check. It doesn't mean that it definitely is, but the likelihood is that there's something somewhere that is unresolved. And sometimes it can manifest through physical symptoms, bodily symptoms.
Yes.
You know, so you have people who have headaches.
The back pain.
Yes, chronic back pain is one. Headaches, stomach aches. Sometimes you go to the hospital, you have all kinds of bodily symptoms that the doctors check everything. They're not able to put a diagnosis. They run all the tests, they can't pick anything. But you know you are not okay.
Yes.
So these are all the indicators that might suggest that someone has an unresolved trauma. Yeah.
You know, this next question I have, I think maybe it's a personal, who knows? But because it really rings true to me. I remember when my mom passed, and I was one of the caregivers, also being a gynecologist, and she having breast cancer and going through all the chemotherapy and everything around it, basically. And when she passed, you know, I found myself in what you call a dark place, which we will say maybe is normal because it's grief and we're quite close to her and all that. But I felt it was traumatic. You know, I was telling you before, I felt literally, there's grief, but I felt like I suffered a huge trauma, and you were in a dark place. I was in a dark place, but I had to look. I had to be strong for everybody. I had a hospital. I had employees. I had patients. I had my kids. I had to just come out every day and run a normal life. Try to push through a normal life, and yet inside me was dead, literally. And that's a story of a journey of another day. But and that's what I want to ask here, because it's what happens a lot, is that because what I couldn't even seek help, because most people look at you because you're successful, they perceive your success, because a lot sometimes it's perception.
Yeah.
Because you're a professional, you're successful, you own a business, you're meant to be lady boss, you're strong, and they thinking that you have it going all for you. How dare you be in a dark place? Even if this happened to you, people don't see it. And how common is it for you to see people that are successful, professionally or financially, suffering from unresolved trauma? Because people don't see it here, especially in this climate.
Yes, it is
where everything's related to finance.
Common,
yes,
but you have to be looking out for it to see it.
Yeah,
and that brings me to what we call trauma-informed care.
Yes.
Trauma-informed care means if you have the information about what trauma is and how it affects people, you're able to pay a little more attention than usual. So you say, how are you? And someone says, I'm fine. That's a social response.
Yes.
I'll tell you a story. I bumped into someone. You know how you go to church after service, everyone is saying, oh, hi, after service, we're all saying hi, hi. And so I saw this lady and I said, oh, how are you? She said, I'm fine. And then she took 2 steps and then she stopped and she came back and said, actually, I'm not fine.
Oh.
And then she started talking. She's not a friend of mine, but Chito, she was talking for the next 2 hours.
Wow.
I couldn't leave. She just talked and talked and talked. And at intervals, she would say, I'm sorry I'm keeping you, but I need to talk. And she just talked. She had gone through so much, but this is a very successful young lady. She has a big business. She's doing well. Her family, well, from all appearances, seems stable and, okay. So it is very common, but we have to be more sensitive. We have to pay closer attention to each other. So the issue of trauma isn't something that should be left to the specialists, to the therapists, to the psychiatrists, to the counselors. You and I, everyone can help each person if we just pay a little more attention. And I'm so sorry that you went through what you did with your mom's passing and all. But again, it brings me to the point. We have to care for caregivers. Because the caregivers are at the highest risk.
Real high risk
of suffering the effects of trauma.
Because you know what's going on.
Exactly.
Everybody else is waiting for you to tell them, and you can tell them some, you might not tell them all, but you take all in.
Yes.
You know what to expect.
Yes.
And so it's hard. I think it was the hardest for me.
So, but us as caregivers also, we have to refuse to be deified.
Sure.
Refuse to accept the role that society thrusts on you and says you must be strong all the time. Because you're human. So you've got to be ready to be vulnerable sometimes. And if it means breaking down in public,
that's fine.
That's fine.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Sure.
If that means that tomorrow you're going to heal. So that brings me to the steps to healing. The first step to healing when you've been traumatized is being heard.
That's important.
Being heard. And as simple as it sounds, it's really not simple.
No, it's not.
It's not.
And not many of us doctors actually stop and pause to hear. And some people come to us and we're like, the next patient.
Exactly. Yes. But then you can't blame the doctors. There's so many patients. There's so little time. So, which is why I keep saying, there are some things we can all do for one another. We don't have to be professionals.
That's not
Every human being can learn to be an empathetic listener, for instance. Every person can learn to be an empathetic listener.
Very important.
And what an empathetic listener is someone who can listen without judgment. Someone who can listen
I love that, without judgment.
Patiently.
Yeah, without judgment.
Without judgment. Without being dismissive.
Mm.
Without belittling your pain.
Mm.
You know, because sometimes you're telling someone your pain and the person says, is that all?
Is that all?
Let me tell you what this other person
is suffering from.
But that's not right. My pain is painful to me.
Yes, yes.
So a good listener, we can all learn, we can
Yes.
all train ourselves by being intentional
To listen.
to create a trauma-informed society, to learn to listen without judgment.
Mm.
Just listen. And we need to learn how to be comfortable with discomfort. And what I mean by that is, nobody is comfortable seeing another person in pain.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me something that is very distressing to you, the tendency for me is to quickly shush you, to hush you and say, it's okay, Dr. Chito, you don't have to talk about it. You're going to be all right.
Yeah, because
but really, I'm protecting myself.
Mm.
It's too painful to hear.
Yes.
It's too painful to listen to. So I think I'm protecting you, but I'm really protecting my own heart.
That's true. That's so true.
But when you want someone to heal, you share in their pain.
And they want to cry, that's fine.
Yes.
Let them let it out.
And if you
Yes.
feel like crying because they are crying, it's also okay to cry with them. So being heard is very critical and very important. And the person that is hurting needs to feel that they are heard. Because the moment you're able to speak to someone and you're able to really speak in full detail without masking some aspects because you are afraid of their judgment, what they would say, what they would think of you, it's like something, a penny drops somewhere. Even neuroscience has found that speaking to someone who truly understands, that makes you feel heard, does something to your emotional brain.
Definitely, definitely.
So the healing begins. So when we're hurting, like in the experience that you had, what you needed was a good listener to start with.
Well, I was lucky. I think I had a friend who knows how to listen. I don't know how she does it. I'm learning to be a listener, a better listener, and she just will listen. And it really does help. I mean, I will weep, I will cry, I will come back, because it was such a journey. And it wasn't a one-year journey, by the way.
Yeah.
And having a background myself in psychology, I knew the struggle, but having her there was important. That listening was truly important.
And talking about listening, let me just chip in here that when you're listening to someone and you want to help them heal, apart from how you present yourself, like you give them your time, your attention, your respect, no judgment, there are also 3 listening questions you can use to help them to explore deeply. Because they may just be talking about their pain without really knowing the aspects of things that they need to say that would help them heal. So there are 3 questions we could use.
Okay.
One is, what happened? That we usually ask. And sometimes even without asking, you are told what happened.
Yes.
But in speaking about what happened, it helps the person to put in context and in order exactly what happened. Because when people have traumatizing experiences, sometimes a lot of emotions go into the process and they may get it all mixed up. So if you don't have them put it into words, they might mix up exactly what happened or the order in which it happened or who said what or who did what. So it helps to begin to untangle the mess of the memories mixed with the emotions. Yes. That's first question, what happened? The second one is almost more important. How did you feel?
How did you feel? Okay.
How did you feel makes the person stop and say, of course they know they are not happy, but put some words to those feelings. Are you angry? Are you frustrated?
Are you sad?
Are you sad? And if you're angry, who are you angry at? Are you angry at God? Are you angry at yourself? Are you angry at your family members? Are you angry at your colleagues? Name it. When you are able to identify the emotions and name them, it moves along the healing process. And then the third question that we can use is, what was the hardest part for you? Because when people go through, if we take the example that you gave of when you lost your mom, it's always very painful to
Yes.
lose one's mom,
Yes.
especially a mother that you were so close to.
Yes.
But there are so many aspects to it. Maybe in losing your mother, you also lost a friend.
Yes.
In losing your mother, maybe you also lost a sponsor. You know, there are many roles that she played in your life. And it's important to recognize and identify in words all the losses that accompany the trauma. Because a lot of times we see it as just one loss. I lost my mother. But many times that one loss encapsulates so many losses.
Yes. Yes.
And you need to be able to sit down and identify and
those,
name them one after the other. And when someone asks you, what was the hardest part for you? It helps you go within yourself, explore, and say, in the midst of all these losses, which would I say is really the deepest? Or is it even nothing to do with any of those losses? Am I feeling like I'm a doctor, I should have saved her? That
I would say guilt.
Yes, that could be part of it.
Yes.
So it can come in the form of guilt. Depending on the type of trauma, there could be shame, there could be anger, you know. So there are so many things, but it's important to identify them one after the other. And if you have a listener who is trauma informed, who understands these things, they're able to ask you these are three. Of course, there are a lot of questions that could be asked, but these are three easy ones that I could leave
to remember. So, what happened? How did you feel? What was the hardest part of it for you? Okay, I think I need to write down, because it's important to have these guides when you meet, because you know, in our line of work, we do meet a lot of people going through serious trauma. And I think I love this, because this is something I can even share with other people working with me, share with friends, or myself, when people just say, look, you know, okay. But have you ever, you know, like we talked about, you know, how do you make you feel? You know, that second question, how did it make you feel, is the main, is like, it just gave me like a heart, like put it in context of and I talk about my mom's loss, because I think that's the last traumatic experience that I really went through, that took me so many years to come out of. But when you say, how did it make you feel, that it makes me stop to say, how did I feel? Because there are so many feelings, you know. I know you do have the steps of grief, but I think I went off those steps. But I had the anger, you had the guilt. Sometimes you felt betrayed. And when you say betrayed, I don't know. I feel like, okay, it's wrong to say betrayed by God, but I felt like I was, Dr. you know, Chito. You're let down.
Dr. Chito, I have to stop you
there. Good. So see, I'm coming now. This is good because
because this is one of the issues we have with people who believe in God. They're so scared of really saying what they feel and what they think. But you know what? God knows you think it. So you might as well say it. So you're only protecting yourself from people. God himself knows it already. So I do feel betrayed by God. And there's nothing wrong with that. I
think that was a strong, at least that was a strong part for me. And I remember anytime I heard, it took me a while to get back into church too, because anytime I heard a particular song that we played in her room, you know, when we're trying to pray, I didn't want to hear any of those songs again. So it comes back to avoiding reminders of the most traumatic experience. And I think when I even deal with patients, I see these same things when they're going through hard times. Not trying to, and you're right, we are a religious society. Whether you're Christian or you're Islam, we are a religious society. And everybody's so scared to say what they're feeling when it comes to that angle. But sometimes that's the deepest part. And for many reasons, the spiritual part of you is a very significant part of you.
Can I just step in there and say something about that? You know, I think our fear is based on the fact that we don't understand the God that we serve. But luckily, we have a handbook, the Bible, that tells us who he is, how he interacts with people, how he responds to people. Our Lord Jesus said to him, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, if he said that, then I can say it. True. You understand what I'm saying? Why have you forsaken me? You know, he called 3 of his closest friends and said, my heart is breaking. Come and pray with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to God and said, this thing is breaking my heart. Please take it away.
True.
That's our Lord Jesus Christ. So if my heart is breaking, it's okay for me to call my friends and say, my heart is breaking.
True.
Even if I'm a pastor or a bishop.
Yes. True.
You can call those people who are less spiritual than you and share with them. You see, being heard doesn't have to do with the level of spirituality.
True.
It's just a human-to-human connection.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that happens when you know that another human being understands or feels you.
True.
You know how you say, I feel you.
Yes.
You know?
I get
you.
Yeah, I understand.
When you feel that people understand. So I say to people, you can't be more spiritual than Jesus.
True.
So why are we trying to be? And if you look at the Psalms, you will see the Psalms are full of laments, where whether it's David or any other person that wrote the Psalms, because he wrote most of them, he's saying, oh God, why are you letting my enemies rejoice over me? Have you abandoned me? Have you forsaken me? This is not right. You know, so sometimes we find in the scripture people accusing God.
Yes.
Even the book of Jonah that he sent and was swallowed by the fish, you know. And at the end of the story, Jonah was angry with God. If you read the chapter 4 in Jonah, Jonah was angry with God and he said to God, this is why I said I didn't want to go, because I know what you will do. You forgive them and you make me look like a false prophet. It's not fair. And God was not offended.
True.
He took time to explain to him.
Yes.
That he loved the people and he wanted them to repent. So what am I saying? God expects us to be real. To say it the way it is.
So he can work on you, really.
His love can accept even our accusations. And when we understand that, we stop being religious and build a relationship with someone who truly loves us.
That's a good one. All right, that's deep. See, I love this. This is, as I'm helping those that are listening, I'm helping myself. So I think this is a great thing. Now, I know, have you, like, for example, what are some of the misconceptions about trauma healing, you know, that you've spoken about, that you've encountered in your work, and how do you address them? Like you've just addressed one, which is a major one, when people are afraid to speak their heart when it comes to spirituality. What are the other misconceptions apart from this that you have faced?
The other one that is common too, also in the church, is, okay, there was this lady, she's a minister, and incidentally, I don't know why I remember that now. She lost her mom.
Okay.
And 2 years down the line, she's in church and there's worship going on and she's just standing while everyone else is, you know, lost in the worship, and someone comes and taps her and says, you should get over it. It's 2 years. So there is this misconception that
at time,
especially if you are a minister, if you are a ranking person in the church, you should quickly get over things. But you know, we're as different as our fingerprints.
Yes.
And the way we process pain, the way we process grief is just as different. That this person is a pastor doesn't make it easier for them or faster. So what that leads to is what we call a false bridge on the grief journey. So the grief journey, like you made a reference to, you know, you have the denial and the anger.
Yes.
And then by the time you finally accept it, you know, there's this sense of hopelessness and deep sadness that you feel like, I don't even know why I'm still living when I've had such a huge loss in my life. But if you're able to get through that, you can get to new beginnings.
Yes.
Where you do accept that there is a major loss, but you're able to live with the loss, as it were. And you may do some things that will make it easier for you to cope with the loss. Like in your case, you set up a foundation.
Yes.
you know, and so you're helping.
Oh, so you know that one. That was actually where I started healing.
So exactly.
Yeah,
So that's
that was my healing. That was my medication for my trauma.
Exactly.
You know, setting up the foundation and going into communities, and every time I did work, I felt her presence.
Exactly.
I felt, you know, it was definitely
so
healing.
some good can come out of such a painful experience.
True.
It doesn't mean that you love the experience. It doesn't mean you've necessarily gotten over it in that sense, but you can live alongside it and impact your world and be a more empathetic person. If someone came to you now and says, I lost my mom, it's very likely that you'll be a very good counselor to that person.
True.
Just because you've been there. So there are good things that can come out of it. So when we refuse to go through the grief journey and we claim that we're okay when we're not okay, and we quote scriptures and say it is well, you know, when we know it is not well. So you go back in your closet and you cry and you come out and say, I'm fine, nothing happened. You set yourself up for a disaster somewhere down the line. There was a lady that attended one of our healing groups, and she told us a story about an accident that they had in their car. The whole family, herself, her husband was driving. And as it happened, she had warned him that he was driving too fast and that she felt they were going to have an accident. But he continued, and they did have an accident, and she had a fracture. You know, so it really rattled him. It took her a long time to recover, but he never really dealt with it. And then over a decade after, he had a party on his birthday, and he was talking to the crowd that gathered, and then he was saying, I love my wife so much. My wife means so much to me. And then he started wailing.
Wow.
He just started wailing, and everybody was like,
this is a birthday.
Birthday, what is going on? What is going on? They couldn't make him stop.
Wow.
Eventually, it turns out that when he said, I love my wife, he just had a flashback.
Of that accident, where you almost lost her.
Yes. So, but you don't want to have a public embarrassment like that, just because you didn't deal with it when it happened. So because he was a man, so that brings me to another issue.
Masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
You know?
And, you know, that's what I'm like, I think this thing of men should not express their emotions, I think is what causes even problems in marriages, to be honest, and relationships. I think that expression, that going through this, their trauma is, I mean, is as important for men as it is. But they look at it like, oh, women are the ones that like to talk mushy, all this talk. But they rather just hold, because you're from a child, no, and you're a boy. Why are you crying? Hold yourself. You hear that a lot. You know, so how does this?
So the issue is, I say to people that culture is dynamic. It's not meant to be static.
True.
So you don't just say, in our culture, men don't cry. Maybe at some point it worked in that society. But the question is this culture working today? Even in the Bible, culture changes when there's a need for it. In the history of the Israelites, land was only shared to men until the daughters of Zelophehad came and said, we need land. We don't have a man in our house, but we want land. And Moses asked God, and God said, give them their land. And the culture changed from that point. I'm just saying that to say culture can change when there is a need for it. Toxic masculinity. This story I just told you is a man. You see what happened to him? So it just shows that even men need to speak and be heard when they are hurting. So this culture that says men should not cry, men should not talk about their emotions, they shouldn't talk about how they feel, it's very bad for the mental health of men. And on the flip side, the culture that says women must cry. For instance, a woman loses her husband, and if she doesn't cry, they say she must have killed him. But maybe she's numb.
And can't feel anything.
She can't feel anything. The grief is so much that she can't even feel. All her emotions have gone, you know, frozen. So we need to understand and leave all these cultures that perpetuate trauma in the lives of people. And that's why we talk about listening without judgment. But then people should also, now talking about men should learn to speak.
True.
to find a good listener to speak about their pains, their hurts, so that they can begin the journey of healing, just like the women.
Right. This title that just came to mind, this Beyond the Scars, because, I feel like, yes, when it comes to, we didn't talk about other things that match or look like trauma, but when it comes to trauma healing, you go through the process, there's still something beyond the process that these scars, I believe, now become signs of strength. Or what happens beyond that? So you have people that have taken through trauma, you feel they're getting better. Then what does the scar stand for some of the patients you've worked with? What goes beyond the scar, So
Okay. So when you said the scar, it reminded me of something I heard recently. Someone said, there's a difference between scars and wounds. A scar is a healed wound.
Yes.
So many of us, what we have are wounds because we haven't healed. And how you know you haven't healed is when you have a wound, if something comes near it, it still hurts. But if it's a scar, even if something comes near it, it doesn't hurt. Even if someone presses it, you don't feel it. You don't even remember it's there. But with a wound, you remember everything. You feel everything. So when we heal, what we have are scars. There's no pain. All we have are just regular memories, not painful memories. For instance, if you've been bereaved and it was really very traumatic, and you have a scar from that painful experience, it doesn't mean you don't miss the person anymore, but you may remember them with a smile. And say, I know what my mom would have said in this circumstance. I remember she would pack her hair this way. So the pain isn't there like that anymore. And so it helps you to be able to, one of the things the scar will do is you're able to help other people because you have a scar. You've healed. You've been through that journey. So if someone else is on that journey, you're able to help them.
True.
And it also helps you to know that you are not alone. You are not alone, and that everything given time, I have to be careful here. Time doesn't heal wounds. But
like they always say,
wounds heal in time.
Wow.
Time doesn't heal wounds, but wounds heal in time if they're exposed to the conditions that make for healing. So we've talked a bit about the conditions like speaking to a good listener, being able to grieve, without being pretentious or without denying it, being able to lament and not be afraid to speak to God and say exactly how you feel, being able to identify the hurts, the pains, the losses, identify them. Okay, so I'm going on that journey now. So when you're able to go through those steps, and as Christians, we will take it to the cross.
Yes.
And give it to God and say, these are my hurts, these are my pains. But it's important to identify them individually, one by one, and name them.
Okay.
It's very important. It's a very important of the healing process. And then when you give it to God, because you trust that, God loves you, and He hears you and He heals you, you can also believe that He forgives you, because sometimes the things that hurt us, part of it may be things we have done we are not happy about.
True.
So you're able to receive forgiveness. And when you receive forgiveness, you're also able to give it to those who may have hurt you. Because sometimes a lot of trauma, I find, is interpersonal trauma.
Yes.
It happens in the context of relationships.
That forgiveness, but sometimes I think when we say the word forgiveness, there are times where it's really hard to forgive as easily. And I always tell people, forgive to free yourself. But sometimes that forgiveness is not as easy, because it depends on what that person,
it's not
kind of trauma
easy.
that person caused for you.
Yes.
To say, oh, I forgive this person. And so I always ask, how do you help people go through that journey of forgiveness?
Okay, so forgiveness is not easy. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's easy. Like you said, it depends on how deep the pain is. It depends on the circumstance, what happened. However, it helps to find out what is the cost of not forgiving. What does it cost me? Forget about the person. Does it cost me anything at all if I don't forgive? And if it does, what does it cost me? So it makes us go back to scripture. So when the disciples of Jesus asked him, teach us to pray, he said, our Father who art in heaven, and he went down and he said, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And then he said, if you don't forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. That's really heavy.
That is heavy.
That is heavy.
But it's still a journey, though. It is. Be real.
Oh, forgiveness is a journey. But you know what doesn't have to be a journey? The decision to forgive.
So that's the intentional part.
Yes. So you can make the decision and say to the Lord, this is really painful. It really hurts me. I don't want to leave this be. But help me to forgive. That decision can be made. Now, the process to get to the point where you no longer feel the pain, where you no longer feel like the person should suffer for what they did to you. Because that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is letting go of that person and not wishing them any harm, essentially.
Okay.
In spite of what they've done to you. Because you trust in the justice and judgment of God. You know, the thing about forgiveness is God loves the offender as much as he loves the offended. And that's what complicates it.
True.
So when you do something that he's not pleased with you about, he doesn't hate you immediately. He gives you time. He tries to reason with you.
True.
You know, and he hopes that you will come round. So when your enemy also does something, God does the same. But it upsets us that he doesn't hit at the enemy. Yeah. But we receive the grace when it's ours. So these are some of the things that we work with. But it takes time, honestly. It does take time. But the important thing is continue to make that commitment and ask for grace to forgive. The determination, the commitment may take a long time, may go on for a long time before the feeling catches up with it. The feeling of forgiveness.
That's true. You know, I'm going to ask you, because one of the things we were talking before when you're talking about trauma, I now know trauma stress disorders. It actually, some people will say this sounds like also it's like it has similarities like depression, which I guess is part of the trauma. Depression, also PTSD. When you talked about flashbacks, so what other have I missed? I mean, how does this fit into those diagnoses as well? Is it like is it part of it, or are we dealing with a whole new?
So no, it's not new at all. It's just that, you know, like I told you, even with addictions, with a lot of mental health diagnoses, trauma is at the root of it. But what happens with using the medical model of treatment is we use chemical substances by way of drugs to numb the symptoms. But you see, someone whose heart is broken can't be healed with antidepressants.
That's if it's trauma and not like biological.
If it's trauma. So you may deal with the symptoms, the physical symptoms of depression. But until you get to the root, to explore the root of the pain and help the person to deal with it, then they're just going to be on those drugs forever. And the moment they go off the drugs, the symptoms come back out. So there are depression, anxiety, even ADHD, bipolar disorders, some oppositional defiant disorder. A lot of trauma sometimes can manifest in those forms, but it doesn't mean that every diagnosis of those things are caused by trauma. Because
some are biological.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Now, when it comes to dealing with trauma, we always talk about the word resilience. That word is always used, like, you know, when you're resilient, when you're able to get through it. What do you think about the whole that being resilient is one of the important aspects of overcoming trauma? What's your thought about that, being resilient?
Okay, so resilience, the way I see it, is the end result.
Okay.
when you heal from your trauma, you become resilient.
Okay, I see.
So when you go through those steps that lead to healing and you heal from the trauma, and remember we talked about the difference between the wound and the scar.
True.
So the healing is that you are not triggered anymore by those things. Mm-hmm. You know, you may not even remember it with such pain anymore. You may remember it, you know, just like any other thing you remember, something that happened in the past, mm-hmm. but not with intense reactions. You know, there's some things you remember with a lot of fear or a lot of anger. You know that the wound is still there. So resilience is the end result. When you have healed from your trauma, you become resilient. And what resilience means is that you're able to, if you go through a similar situation, you can cope. Your coping mechanisms are not overwhelmed. Because what happens with trauma is that you're overwhelmed. You just find that you're not able to deal with it. You can't shake it off and keep moving the way you normally do. But if you go through the steps of healing from trauma intentionally, because you can have a supernatural healing that you don't know how it happened, mm-hmm. you know, but if you intentionally go through the steps, then you acquire skills that make you flexible, that make you know what to do when you have difficult or distressing experiences. For instance, you look out for a good listener. You make sure that you find somewhere that you can have a safe space where you can tell your story, where you can talk about how you felt.
Healing groups.
Yes, healing groups, and what were the hardest parts for you. You get some support, you know. So, and when you do that early, after the event has happened, then it doesn't remain a trauma that stays for long with you. You just deal with it and you move on. So you become, that's what becoming resilient is.
Is being able to move on.
Having the skills to be able to deal with future traumatic experiences, because the world is full of traumatic experiences.
Definitely.
There's no guarantee that
you come through one, you now go to another.
Exactly. But if you have the skills, then whatever comes, you know how to deal with it, and it doesn't hold you hostage.
Okay. Perfect. Now, just before we wrap up, I wanted to be to see if we just talk about practical strategies. I know that you talked about it in our discussion, but kind of single out about practical strategies or you recommend for individuals who are struggling to find hope and healing after experiencing trauma. So if someone now listening says, oh my goodness, I've really gone through trauma and I know this is why I'm like this, because this will definitely give a lot of people insights to what they've been dealing with. Yeah. So what are the practical steps or techniques? What do they do? And this is maybe people from different parts now all in Abuja, but even for those in Abuja, what do we do as well? What's the next best steps when you get that insight or you get insight that someone you're close to is obviously going through trauma? What are the next stages? How do we handle that?
Okay, so like I said, one of the things I always say is, as a society, we can help each other. So we can all learn to be good, empathetic listeners who help each other heal. That is the basic, the fundamental that we can all start with. So I can learn and you can learn. And then I can go look out for a good listener, like we've talked about now, that this is the first step. Find a safe space. I talk a lot about safe spaces because it's not everywhere you can tell your story and you're safe and you heal. In fact, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of people have told their stories in places they thought they were safe and they've been further traumatized.
Yes.
And sometimes, unfortunately, that could be the church. So with the church, with religious organizations, but it doesn't even have to be religious organizations. As human beings, we can learn to pay more attention. You know, I started by saying that. Pay closer attention to people. Find out how they're doing. A friend of yours doesn't check up on you and you're so upset that they didn't check up on you and so you cancel them. I think that's what they say these days. Yes. But you should find out. You don't know what they're going through. Sometimes people are going through stuff. So we should pay more attention to one another.
True.
And we should not always accept the social responses to our greetings, and we should learn to be good listeners, empathetic listeners, not judgmental, You can also look out for, if you feel that is not enough, you can look for a therapist or a counselor, like we do a lot of healing groups, and I believe in the group concept, because even the
We'll put that
neuroscience,
information too.
yes,
yeah.
even the neuroscience shows that healing occurs a lot better in groups, you know, and the model that we use incorporates a lot of the elements that are proven medical science, you know, strategies for healing. So we have a bit of theater, we have a bit of storytelling, we have a bit of question and answer, you know, we even have some dance.
Oh, that's nice.
You know,
that sounds fun.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, really. For a lot of people who go through
Yes.
it's a lot of fun. But in the process of having fun, you get healed.
Do you have an Instagram page, or I mean, we're going to put all this. We can put all this information
Yes.
there.
Okay. So we have our website.
Okay.
Soul Health Wellness. Soul Health Wellness. Soulhealth-wellness.com.
Okay.
Soulhealth-wellness.com.
So we'll also put the information on our site so that they can be able to link as well. I must say though that if you are going through depression or you're thinking of suicide, below, and you have, you know, please do contact us at the numbers that we're going to run below. If you feel that you are trauma, you want to know the next steps, or you want to ask questions regarding this discussion, do contact us as well. All our handles and numbers will be below on as it will scroll below, and will also be on our podcast information page and all our social media pages as well. This has been an exciting episode because it's one that affects everybody. And in our society right now, with all that we hear, some people don't even know they even experience trauma by watching trauma and watching traumatic experiences as well. So I think that having all this information will definitely go a long way to help us to navigate our world as we know it now. There is no shame, and we're definitely breaking this stigma for expressing your emotions, for reaching out for therapy, for being able to meet and join these groups for a better health. You're not healthy unless your mind is healthy. You know, it's not a physical thing, it's also a mind thing. And we're going to talk more on HERcast with Dr. Chito about mental health, emotional health as well. So I'm so happy Dr. Chika Nya-Erik, I call her Dr. Chika, so allow me, for coming on to this show and really just sharing this powerful information with us. Thank you so much for coming on. And to you, my queens, and I know some kings are watching this as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. I ask you to just make sure you tune in again, either on TV at Star Times or on our social media pages or our podcast platforms for another great episode next week. Thank you very much.